Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. SoupX, the Startup Expo, North America's premier startup conference, is March 6th and 7th, 2017, in sunny Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Affordably priced, SoupX is a 2-day international conference featuring workshops, panels, speeches, a $50,000 startup competition, and over 100 exhibitors. For more information, go to sup-x.org. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Adam Force. He's the founder at Change Creator. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you're doing is really important, and I think more and more people need to think about this stuff and actually put into action what you're doing. But maybe before we get into what Change Creator is, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. Well, geez, that goes back many years now.
That's good.
I started in New Jersey, and then I moved to New York City, and then I was there for a number of years, and then I was in Jersey City, and then I was in Philadelphia for the past 6 years. And now I finally made my way down to sunny South Florida, and I'm hanging out here since the past, July 2016. So hanging out here, the heat's gone, the humidity's gone, and now it's 80 degrees, and we're relaxing.
Nice. You made it through all the storms and whatnot?
Yeah, honestly, we all hunkered down for Hurricane Matthew, but it didn't come through. So we have lots of extra food, and lots of extra water here.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So what did you take in university?
I did marketing, that was my thing. I always liked marketing. And honestly, at the time, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So it became one of those generic, okay, I'll do marketing, because I sure as heck wasn't going to do finance and accounting. I mean, I just could never wrap my head around accounting. Like stuff like that, my brain just goes into a knot. And I'm like, but marketing, I was always more of the extrovert, creative. I like to think of myself as creative. I guess everyone does, but that was more interesting to me. So I figured it'll open a large amount of doors and cover off on a lot of opportunities. So that's what I did.
Sure. That's never going to be a bad skill set to have, right? No matter whether you're doing your own thing or you're working for a company or whatnot. So walk me through what Change Creator is and kind of how it came to be.
Yeah, so I'll give you the primary description, and it's a brand that's really just supporting a transition in how we approach business, right?
Okay.
And, I'm focused on social entrepreneurship, and there's lots of debate about what does that exactly mean? Everyone's got their own definition. But really, honestly, at the end of the day, it's about looking at underserved markets and helping to solve social and environmental problems. And to me, you can approach business saying, I want to create a pet rock and sell as many as I can to make a quick buck. Or you create a business that is going to give people a new tool so they can live healthier or, have food on the table, put shoes on their feet, like these things that contribute to making the world just a little bit better. And when we do that, the common good is benefited, and as a whole, we're stronger. So I think that there's room for money to be made in business in general, and just we need to shift our perspective a little more about how we're approaching it. What are our intentions and what we're trying to get out of it? So that's what we're trying to support, and you can see there's a lot of data out there from Pew, Nielsen, millennial research, whatever it is. And the younger the generation gets, Generation Z, and then you have millennials, and then you have Generation X, excuse me, you're seeing more and more of a shift that is going from the, traditional business stuff down to, over 60% millennials say, I think I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And if I do, I want to do something meaningful. It's important for me to buy products from companies that are acting responsibly towards the environment and people. So they're looking down the line and saying, I don't just want to make money. I want to make money because I have to, but I want to make it meaningful. I want to make it fulfilling. I want to have a purpose, So as we see that more and more, I think there's a number of things technologically that are contributing to that shift in behavior. And as that's happening, it's kind of like I almost see it as a quiet revolution stirring up and slowly transitioning.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I want to help be the face of that and bring it to life more and kind of just make it become more of a standard approach to business. So that's kind of where my head is at. And I'll stop there so I don't go on for an hour.
No, I think that's good, and I think it's super important, and I like how you call it like a silent revolution, because I think you're right. Like in a lot of cases, especially like I guess I'm at the tail end of being a millennial. Like I'm 33, so I kind of relate to a little bit of both kind of generations, I guess, in some respects. But it does make a lot of sense. I think that more and more young people actually care about kind of making the world better, or actually giving back to things and causes, and trying to still make money, but donating some of those profits, back to communities, whether it's locally or anywhere else in the world, right? And so I'm curious then, how did you decide to start Change Creator?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I was so stressed and so fed up with the hustle of, New York City, and I was working at, WebMD, and I love that company. It's a great company, and I've learned a lot. But the city hustle gets to you, and just the everyday rigmarole of going to work and blah blah blah, busting your hump, and the pace of New York, as you all know, is probably one of the highest paced cities in the world.
Sure.
I was sitting there with my now wife, and I was like, we've got to just get out of here. And I've always been into self development, and I read philosophy books or all these things to really help me just kind of manage my own stress and have good perspective on things.
Sure.
So we went to Costa Rica, man. We were sitting out in this almond cove, which is like where the rainforest met the ocean, and I'm telling you, we were out. I felt like I was on another planet. And just like so many, I've interviewed a number of people now, and I think 70% of them, they have their aha moment for their business based on their travel experience. And in a different way, this happened for me. I was sitting there with my thoughts. I honestly just kind of got wrapped up and started asking myself, where am I going to be in 10 years? What am I going to be doing? Is what I'm doing right now meaningful to me? What do who is the person I want to become? And what's going to be my legacy in this world? And, as I noticed, I was really into like Neil deGrasse Tyson at the time. And he always talked about how everything is connected, right? And when I was sitting out there, you can really see how just sensitive and precious and how everything works together. So long story short, I was walking down the beach, and I noticed these little grains of I was picking up the sand. I'm like, wow, nobody's out here yet. There's these little plastic particles in there that broke down in the ocean, and they're washing up on the ocean. I was like, man, it's really sad, and it's like choking our ocean. And so anyway, my frustrations got to me, and I was like, I need to go back and I need to do something in my life that tackles these problems. How can I help? Like, what can I do to make my life, worth something here? And so I started getting into the idea of social entrepreneurship. And it was very new to me, obviously. And I just liked the idea because to me, that made sense. Approach business and make an impact, make it meaningful, but make money at the same time. It's basically making a difference through the living that you live. And so I explored that. But at the time, 6 years ago, there was not a lot of information about it. There's no courses like there are today. Books were very limited, and I found one book by Billy Parrish and his friend Devin, I forget his last name, and it was called Making Good. And
Okay.
it's a great book. I mean, in the book, they're like, make a living and a difference. That's like the mantra. And I was like, great, this is right up my alley. They're speaking to me. They're talking about their experience. And, they really share. He dropped out of Yale to start the Clean Energy, what is it, Action Coalition or something like that. I forget the exact name.
Well, that's amazing.
And now it's the biggest movement against climate change for youth today. And now he's also started a solar company. So I got really into it, and I started dabbling with hemp water bottles to reduce plastic pollution. I mean, when you start looking at the plastic, just next time you go through a supermarket or you're just walking around, start taking notice about how much plastic there is, and you're going to be blown away. And then you have to remember, every piece of plastic ever made that you see is still here today from the beginning of humanity, and it will be through the next 20 generations. It's going to be here for over 1,000 years, if not forever. It's not biodegradable.
Yeah,
So
that's
we're
crazy.
just piling it up, and over 6 million tons a year go into the ocean. So when I did that kind of research, I was just like, wow, what can I do? And it's such a big problem that you feel like insignificant. So I dabbled with all kinds of stuff. I was reading books about different kinds of plastics and hemps and all these different things, and on and on and on. It wasn't the best fit for me. I shifted over and I got really into rainforest advocacy for obvious reasons of my travel to Costa Rica and stuff.
Sure.
It's like 90 football fields a second are destroyed of rainforest.
Really? It's that that's
the numbers are
crazy.
just
Wow.
staggering.
Wow.
And what happens is, the biodiversity goes away, and that is something that's essential to human life. That it disturbs the water and the rain cycles, like all these problems. And, so another thing that really got me fed up, dabbled in that. I made websites. I made a conscious news website at one point called thebluepost.com. And that was for me to get all these ideas. I was reading so much, I had to get this information out to people. So I did that for over a year and a half or something like that. And then finally, because I was always listening to podcasts and reading books, I came across a podcast where they started talking about a digital magazine, and they were doing an entrepreneur magazine. And so they said that the readers were asking for more interviews with social entrepreneurs. So the light goes off for me, and I'm like, finally, this might be something I can wrap my head around, because what made it easier is I had skill sets in user experience, design. I know how to manage editorial, like stuff like that was more in line with who I was. So I actually took a self-inventory of like, what are my values? Who am I? What are my skills? All that stuff. And the magazine made the most sense for me. And so I said, great, maybe I won't be a actual social entrepreneur by definition, but I can play in the category. And what I can do is give people the information that I never had, and I can help them along their path, because what I do want to do is make as many social entrepreneurs as possible so that they can start using their brilliant ideas to address these insane problems, which are really created by just flawed systems, that are just failing people left and right. And so, I'll stop there, but that was the idea, and that's what really gave birth to it.
I think it's great how you basically, took some time and kind of figured out kind of who you were and who you wanted to be, and travel. I kind of had a similar experience. Like I spent some time in LA over the summer in 2004, and kind of I used to go to the ocean every day and just like sit like a foot from the water and just kind of like ponder who I was and what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do and that kind of thing. And I think I recommend that to a lot of people, is just kind of go somewhere, even if it's for like a few weeks or months or whatever, and just travel and kind of find yourself, especially when you're kind of young and whatnot. And I think I love how you basically took your skill set and are using it to actually like make a change and better the planet. And so I'm curious though. So you mentioned a podcast, you mentioned a magazine, and obviously you're covering kind of social entrepreneurs, but how do you kind of find your content and decide, what goes in the podcast, who you interview kind of for the magazine and for the podcast?
It is a selective process. So I try my best, despite being spread pretty thin, but I try to make a strategy, and I think ahead about the types of things that are being discussed in the market right now. But what really drives it is who I believe I'm talking to specifically.
Okay.
It's the target audience. You have to understand your persona. And so I've gone through several iterations, excuse me, and hypotheses of, who my target audience segments are, and then who the most important segment that I'm talking to right now is. And so I've developed my personas and done a ton of research, and the research is very important. So you have your research on millennials today or entrepreneurs today, and then I've done surveys to my audience once I was able to build up some of the audience. I surveyed them to find out, well, what kind of problems are you having? Do you own a business now? Do you not own a business now? Why do you read Change Creator Magazine? And stuff like that. So now I can start understanding, well, here's what I need to put in here for content, because that's what the person I'm talking to needs. So that's the important thing to me. I think that if you don't know who you're talking to, even if it is a hypothesis, what are their favorite movies? And you might ask, well, why would you care about what someone's favorite movies are? I will give you a reason why. The
Sure.
reason why is if they tell you that it's Rudy and remember the Titans, the football movie, or things like that, then you're going to sit there and say, well, this is a person that loves the idea of the little guy winning or overcoming adversity. And so then you're going to say, well, that might be then someone who's a good fit for entrepreneurial information, right?
Sure.
So it kind of gives you a sense of who they are. And those are the movies, though, that people watch over and over, despite how many times they've seen them. Why? Why do they keep watching them? Why do they like it so much? Where are they from? Where are they in their scale of consideration? Meaning, are they not even are they even thinking about social entrepreneurship at all? Maybe they haven't even heard of it. That's like the very, very top of the scale. But if you go down a little further, they might have heard of it but haven't done any research. Or maybe they heard of it and they've done a ton of research. Maybe they've heard of it and they've actually attempted to start a business, but they're stuck. So like, where are they in that scale of considering this category? And so you got to know where they are. Otherwise, you don't know what they need at that point in their life. So I think that's an important part of the process, and that is what dictates some of our content, especially the blog, which I'm trying to get ramped up a little bit more. And in the magazine, I tend to look at who the key front feature will be on the cover.
Sure.
And, for example, if I have somebody like Neil Patel, who just got released this past October, he's a marketing expert. But he wrote a great book about having meaning in your life and hustling to live that passion. So we did a magazine that was more focused on marketing for that one. The theme became like SEO, driving scale for your social enterprise, and traffic, all things that, social entrepreneurs need to know. And so he kind of set the theme for the magazine. And I have a social entrepreneur awardee, Dr. Alasdair Harris, which will be coming out on our cover. And he does a lot of great stuff for marine biology and preservation with different cultures around Madagascar that are scaling up dramatically now. So that issue might lean a little bit more towards, the environmental side and talking some of those things. So sometimes it sets the theme for the magazine.
That's awesome. I think that's great. So how often are you releasing new issues?
It's every other month right now.
Okay.
And, my original intention was to not make the magazine what the brand is. The brand is a brand that supports and wants to be basically breathing new life into social entrepreneurship, getting it a little bit more of a, making it, having more cool factor, right? Making it that standard for entrepreneurship, the approach of entrepreneurship. And so that's what the brand is. And then the magazine is a initiative of that brand. And that was done to get some recognition, start getting, to talk to some social entrepreneurs and using it as a tool to start getting our information out there and building trust with the audience that, we are professional and we do have good content. And so that is a stepping stone, just like the podcast is. And it has a reoccurring monetary model so that we can try and sustain the business. So as long as you're being profitable, then it brings some money in.
Sure. So we'll cover kind of monetization in a second, but I'm curious then, let's talk a bit about the podcast. Do you have the people that are in the magazine on the podcast or different people? And how often are you putting out a new episode of the podcast?
So right now we just moved a couple weeks ago to become, just starting in October, a weekly podcast that's every Tuesday.
Okay.
And so, so that goes out every Tuesday. So we just had one go out today with Tim Berry. And so Tim Berry was released in the magazine last week with the latest edition. And so, yes, they are in the magazine. But in the magazine, we'll go into more detail, have visual examples, resources, all those types of things. So it is more robust in the magazine.
Sure.
And then obviously the podcast, it depends what people want. And then there's a lot. There's usually 2 interviews in the magazine. There could be 3. I've had up to 4, but I tend to now do one feature, which is that main interview, and then one secondary interview, which could be on marketing, or it could be a second success story with a social entrepreneur that offers tips and things like that. So it just depends. But yeah, they are weekly, and they do run in the magazine and on the other platforms like iTunes and our website and stuff.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious then, how do you monetize this thing?
It's just a basic subscription model like
Okay.
other magazines. So, you can do $1.99 a month just to make it simple, or you do $19.99 for the year. I mean, both are super. I mean, I would charge $100, to do it, just because the amount of work and time and the design and the
Yep.
content and just everything that goes into one magazine, I think, is undervalued. But we're not trying to price gouge people just to make money here. The idea is to get content out there and give people a resource they can use to really boost their business if they already currently have one, or learn how to take the steps they need to take in order to get their social enterprise off the ground. But even more importantly, really to show them, how are people that are making these big impacts on people's lives, how are they actually making a living doing that? What are their ideas? How does it work? And we want to expose more and more people to that, so that they can see how it works and they can get ideas and they get inspired. So, that's where we're at now. But, it's very competitive. You have
Sure.
business, or I will call it economic entrepreneurship. And that is, the Inc. magazines and the Fast Company magazines. Their focus is traditional economic entrepreneurship. And, they're doing $9.99 for a subscription, but they have other, obviously, huge, revenue resources outside of that digital magazine. So it makes it very tough to compete. So you have to make a decision at some point. Do you make it high price and show value, or do you make it a lower price just to compete with everybody else? And right now we're just doing low point of entry, because we're not trying to create a barrier to entry.
No, that makes sense. And you could adjust your pricing at some point, right? Or add new features or whatever, right? Who knows, right?
There's always, yeah, you can always do that. Absolutely. So, those types of things can happen. And we did every other month. It makes it a little easier to focus on other things in between.
So you've had some really big name people, appear in the magazine and obviously the podcast. How did you go about reaching out to some of these people? I'm sure people are always wondering kind of how you reach out and get these people to be in your projects and.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're working our way up the ladder. That's for sure. So step by step, we try to keep, strategically bringing on bigger and bigger names, and building our proof of value and stuff like that. So, up to this date, we've had a couple big names, which are social entrepreneur awardees, obviously a key target for us. And then, Neil Patel has been our latest one, like I mentioned before. So that was a nice addition to Change Creator. And honestly, I am just getting those guys through traditional outreach. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is, if I go to their website, sometimes they have a press page, or
Yep.
I find out their email and I'll do a direct email. I mean, a lot of these guys, if they have a company name, you just put their first name at theircompany.com,
Yeah, you're right.
and
Yep.
you just take a stab at that. So it just depends, and make sure you follow their guidelines of, how to manage a request. Neil Patel is very particular, and he has multiple inboxes that go to different places. So you kind of have to shoot for the right one, and he's not going to read them all. He can't. He gets 1,000 emails a day. So how do you get his attention? I went directly to him, with his email, and did an outreach, and I kept it super short, super precise. And I showed value towards him, because he has this book he had a book that was coming out, the one that I mentioned earlier. And so I talked about that. It was a free press opportunity, put him on the cover of a magazine. People seem to be attracted to the idea of a cover of a magazine.
Totally.
And so it happens that way. I've had a few people say no that are super busy, and it's understandable, right? But
Yep.
otherwise, it's been pretty standard. I haven't had to do anything tricky. I know some folks there's a lot that can be done, going to Amazon and looking at the upcoming books and stuff like that. So I've done some stuff. That is how I found Neil, but I didn't contact like their publishing company and all that stuff. I just found out that they have something coming up that I can speak to. And then I went into the traditional outreach route. If I don't hear back, then I'll start exploring other avenues. But the subject line front cover of magazine, usually gets them.
Kind of do the same kind of stuff. Like I cold reach out to people for the show, and like you said, sometimes you hear back, sometimes you don't hear back. But I think most people are really happy to talk to and promote what they're doing, right? And especially when you're putting it in a positive light, and you're trying to, you're basically saying like, I love what you're doing. You want to have a conversation, and most people are willing to do that, right? If they can schedule it in their busy schedule.
9 times out of 10, yes. And the busier they get, when you get up to the Ariana Huffingtons and Tony Robbins, they have so many people coming at them for requests that, they're going to be looking for you to prove your value of why they should spend time with you versus someone else, because they can only do so much at a time. So it's, what's your reach, what's your readership, and all these kinds of questions will come out. So if you're prematurely getting in front of them strategically, and you don't have certain things to speak to of that kind of value, not to say it can't be done, but it'll be more difficult.
Yeah, very much so. That makes sense. And then you give part of your proceeds to charity, correct?
Yeah, so at the end of each year, we'll do an assessment and do 10% of earnings towards the charity water. I think it's such a great group.
Yeah, no, I learned about Charity Water a number of years ago. Kevin Rose runs a show. It was like foundation.kr was his domain or something. I don't know if he still does it, but it was like him interviewing kind of other entrepreneurs in the Valley. And then he went to Google Ventures and he kind of kept doing them a bit. But that's where I learned about them. And I think their cause is really, really cool and great, and what they're doing for kind of the whole kind of global scale. But do you maybe want to kind of cover exactly what that charity does, just for the listener that doesn't know what about them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they go around to different areas that are lacking the resources and utilities to get access to the water that is there. So, I mean, you could be in Haiti and, they have no water. These women are, especially these young girls who can't go to school, they can't get their education because they spend their darn day walking 8 miles to go get water that is completely polluted and toxified, and they carry it back for the family to use. Then they get sick. It's just a horrible cycle. And it's not that there is no water there. It's that they don't have the tools to get to it. So charity water, for every about $10,000, you can have a well built. And so that is, they will go there and they dig the well, they give them the access, and then now they're not walking 8 miles anymore. So the short story is they basically are doing the work that to tap the resources that are there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm curious then, there's got to be a lot of people out there that are looking to kind of give back and do some sort of social program, maybe even in their company. What do you tell people to how to get started in actually caring and kind of giving back when you're, have a company that's been running for a number of years?
If you already been running for a number of years?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what your company is and what it's doing. I mean, if you haven't started it, just like, virality, it's like, have you built the company with that intention, meaning that your output and your product or service is, rendering a social or environmental service. So, it gets to be more difficult if you're just creating, some widget that is for people to comb their hair. If you want to do something then that is more responsible or supportive, and it's not essentially the product, is a couple things. One, make sure your product is being built sustainably.
Okay.
Where are the resources coming from? How are the people treated that actually make those resources? And then what are those resources? So you have fair trade, you have responsible, resource collection for your building of your actual product and manufacturing. So sustainability is a factor. And then you have the TOMS model, like Blake Makowski, that you can apply, which is, a buy one, get one. So if you buy a pair of shoes, he gives one away.
Sure.
Can you apply a model like that so that you can support people in a certain way? Maybe even if it is a comb, hey, that is something that other people need too, that they probably don't have access to. So there's opportunities like that. Contributing to charities is another method, but charity is different because that is not, it's not necessarily giving people a tool to, it's a little bit different. So like when you do a charity, that is, I guess your question is a little bit different because you're talking about giving a good spin to a company that already exists. What I was going to say about a charity is that it's more of a short-term win. So they play a very important role, but it's for the immediate. For example, if people are starving and you raise funding to give those people food, like with this charity,
Sure.
then they're going to alleviate the problem for a temporary period of time, but they're not actually going to give them the tools or change policies or change the system in any way to shift the equilibrium, the norm, so that that problem doesn't exist anymore. So it's just that temporary relief. That's all.
No, that makes sense. And so I'm curious then, like, I guess it's changing the mindset, right? Because what comes to mind is anytime there's like a major holiday, whether it's like Thanksgiving or Christmas, there's all these like food and gifts and drives and whatnot. And you're right, like they solve a problem for, a few days or a few weeks, but people need stuff throughout the year, right? And just kind of changing that mindset that we should be maybe giving throughout the year instead of just giving, one or twice a year, right? On these major kind of holidays.
Yeah. I mean, how do you tweak your business model to do the two things, to maybe incorporate some level of giving on a regular basis, or to make sure that you're doing things sustainably and you're not supporting some kind of slave labor, right? Things like that are big in the fashion industry. I just spoke to someone about that. And so, yeah, it does become a mindset. So take a step back and look at the whole system. And, it's not just here's my business, here's what I do. I make a product and whatever happens after that, I don't care. It has to be, where is it coming from? Where does it go? And how does it impact environment and people? So you look at that whole picture because everything plays together.
Sure.
And you have to give it that 360 view. And then you can start shifting your models and stuff so that you are considerate of that, which now you're going to be a much healthier and sustainable company all around.
Sure. So it sounds like just do your homework, really, is what it comes down to, right? And then I think you could also turn that into a marketing kind of PR story for your company as well, right? So it can have kind of multiple benefits, not just obviously like affecting people's lives, but you can also use it for your marketing, your company, and look what we're doing and changing and, kind of giving back. And I think especially as you're recruiting kind of younger people to come into a company, or you're trying to keep your current employees, I think it kind of makes a lot of sense. To your point earlier in our conversation about just kind of millennials and younger people they really care about this stuff, right? Where I think some of the older generation does care, but a lot of them just, it's not something they think about on a daily basis.
No. And to your point about thinking through it, it is also, if you have an existing business right now, it is about the mentality and the mission that you apply that everybody goes by. So you don't want to have I interviewed Carol Sanford, and this is not an interview that's released yet, but she wrote the book, The Responsible Entrepreneur, and also The Responsible Business. And she's quite a brilliant mind, but she has wonderful examples of how companies like who you would never imagine, like Procter and Gamble, have changed the way they've done business by reassessing their teams. So instead of having isolated teams working on different things, they made sure from the top down that their guidelines and values of what they were trying to accomplish with sustainability with their products was threaded through all departments, and at the same time all departments were able to communicate and work together. So now we're all on the same page, we're working towards a common mission, and we understand what we're trying to accomplish. And they had just ginormous results of with that kind of pursuit. Obviously I'm dumbing it down to a couple of sentences, but It's a whole big discussion. but it did come down to this collective thinking, shifting, making sure people understood the principles and guidelines of what they were trying to do, getting people on the same page, opening communication, having transparency. And by changing that old business model that was, very different and isolated, they really were able to shift the end result now and get much better success.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I know the other industry that I've heard has been struggling to recruit people is kind of the oil industry, right? Because younger people are just like, I don't want to work for you. It's just what it comes down to. They don't care about the money. They don't care about all that stuff, right? And so, it's nice to see some of these big, kind of large, archaic enterprise kind of modernizing, for lack of a better term.
The power of the people. They have to submit to the will of the people. And it's a scary game out there because you see lots of manipulation, lots of marketing ploys to, twist the thoughts of people and what's real and what's not, what they're doing, what they're not. They have the whole concept of greenwashing. It's
interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Are you familiar with greenwashing? So, it's the idea. Yeah.
I've heard of it. Yeah. But for the listener, maybe just mention what it is.
So it is using sustainability, responsibility, good causes as a marketing tactic to get consumer buy-in, to get consumer trust, where on the back end, it's not really something that is being applied. So it's basically false advertising. And it's kind of like going to buy a carton of milk and it has, certain like BS comments on there about, how it's sustainable, or it shows the cows in a nice pasture and this is what it's like and all this kind of stuff, when really it's like the most brutal like dairy farm you've ever seen in your life. So it's stuff like that, or, they have different marketing on, eggs and things like that free range. Okay. What does free range mean? Does anybody actually look up the definition of what that actually the guidelines are for free range? Because all it means is that they have to have access to like the outdoors, if I remember correctly, for like an hour in a week.
Okay. Yeah.
And they still clip their beaks. They still make them stand on wired cages their whole entire lives that like cut through their feet, like just brutal conditions. So you have to understand like what those things really mean. And just for those listeners who really want healthy eggs, get the ones that are labeled humane certified.
Oh, interesting. Okay. No, I think that's good though, right? Because I think a lot of people just don't even think about it or don't really care. They just see a label. They're like, well, that must be true, right?
Yeah, must be good. Yeah. Must be good. Absolutely. Some marketer came forward that was actually an actor, and she did this whole skit about how they use language and, imagery to really kind of make you feel like you're buying the right stuff. So you got to be very careful. Just become an informed purchaser. It's the neglect and the, out of sight, out of mind, which is really not only hurting the person, but it hurts everybody collectively.
Sure. Well, Adam, we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so maybe let's close it with mentioning where people can get more information about Change Creator and where they can get the issues to the magazine and the podcast.
Yeah, sure. So Change Creator, you can just visit us at www.changecreatormag.com. Our website has all kinds of goodies. So anything that you're looking for, there's free downloads. There's also access to the magazine, free podcasts. And the magazine is on Google Play and iTunes. We hope you check it out. Honestly, it's the cost of lunch in New York, and you get just tons of solid content. We would love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. Give us your feedback. We're still a growing company, and we want to hear from you as much as possible.
Perfect, Adam. Well, thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you. And have a good rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Great, man. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.